Thank you. Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Zients. Senator Begich, I think I have a graph that will show you that surge in spending. And also to answer Senator Sessions' question to you, in fact—
I'll look to OMB to give me that. No disrespect to my friend.
Well, I will use OMB's numbers. This comes right out of Table S1 from President Obama's budget last year, and then Table S1 from President Obama's budget this year. It's called Total Outlays for 10 years. You can see in the 90s, the go-go 90s, we spent $16 trillion over 10 years. The last 10 years, we spent $28 trillion. Last year's budget showed spending of $46 trillion. This year's budget, in the tables, in President Obama's budget, shows spending of $47 trillion. So, again, I'm just doing you a favor and answering Senator Sessions' question for you. This budget spends more than last year's budget and spends more than the baseline. I actually have a question for you, though. You're claiming $4 trillion in deficit reduction. But again, going back to your budget, last year in Table S14, it shows total gross federal debt in the year 2021, and it showed a figure estimating or projecting at $26.3 trillion. This year's budget, Table S15, shows total gross federal debt for 2021, same year, at $25 trillion. Now, that's a reduction of $1.3 trillion, but didn't we pass, as part of the Budget Control Act, $900 billion in the first tranche? That kind of uses up that $1.3 trillion. Where's the other $4 trillion in deficit reduction?
Well, the $4 trillion of deficit reduction is the sequester money, which we believe should come through a balanced approach, and then there's $2 trillion more.
But Mr.
Zients,
I realize those are your segmented talking points. But if you take a look at the growth in debt, one year versus another, for 2021, the baseline last year would have had debt at $23.6 trillion. This year's budget shows it at $25 trillion.
But we have
2021.
We have a much more honest baseline. We have a baseline that assumes the patch.
But we're not reducing the deficit by $4 trillion, because if you were, that debt level would go from 26.3 trillion minus $900 billion for the Budget Control Act. So then you'd be at 25.4 trillion, and then take away 4. We should be about 21.4 trillion, shouldn't we? If we were really reducing deficit by $4 trillion.
What we're doing here is we're taking into account what is truly business as usual, using a baseline that includes the annual patching of SGR, the annual patching of AMT.
What we are not doing is reducing the deficit by $4 trillion. That is smoke and mirrors. It is not being reduced by $4 trillion. Not even close.
It's being reduced by $4 trillion versus the business-as-usual approach of patching things like SGR and AMT.
Okay. Anyway, so just so everybody understands, we are not reducing the debt and deficit by $4 trillion in this budget. It's not happening. It was interesting, in response to what's a fair share, you quote a couple figures. So on the one hand, you said it'd be fair share, and then you'd be satisfied. Democrats would never come to us again going, the rich got to pay a little bit more, their fair share, at 39.6%. I didn't come prepared to put this on a chart, but Congressman Paul Ryan has done a pretty effective job showing that with the health care law, marginal tax rates are going to rise to about 44.5%. So that would be above the fair share, wouldn't it?
I'm sorry, I'm still focused on your prior question.
Because I want to move on. So anyway, you said 39.6% top marginal tax rate would be the fair share.
That's what the President is proposing in this budget.
But with the health care law, already things in place, and Congressman Paul Ryan has laid this out, we're at 44.5%. So that's above the fair share. I mean,
well, we're talking about ordinary income rates. There's different taxes, obviously. I'm talking about in the President's budget. The President is suggesting that the 35%, which was enacted in 01 and 03, go back up to where it was in the Clinton era, which is 39.
And then some. And then with Obamacare, knock that up to 45%. Now you're thinking that's fair. Another way you said it would be fair is if we went back to the share that the top 1% paid during the 90s, during the Clinton administration. The average over the Clinton administration's 8 years was 32.8% of the total income tax burden was paid by the top 1%, 32.8%. Under Bush, it was 36.7%. And in 2007, the top 1% paid 40.6%, which was a larger share than the entire bottom 95%. Of the now again, you're saying that's not quite enough. That's not quite fair enough share yet.
Senator Johnson, The root cause there is the tremendous wealth accumulation by a few, and the fact that our middle class has not grown, not benefited.
We have a very progressive tax rate, very progressive. It's actually one of the reasons when we have recessions, we have such a fall off in revenue because we have such a progressive tax rate. But again, that's just not quite fair enough that the top 1% in the best year paid more than 40% and paid more than the entire 95% bottom part of the income.
I think it's fair that we're in a situation where we need deficit reduction, and that deficit reduction should come in part through revenue. The President's proposing $2.50 in spending cuts for $1 of revenue.
I know that's all
a fair share, and that the wealthiest 2% should pay their fair share, and that we should have no tax cuts whatsoever on families earning under $250,000.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.